When I became Chancellor, I inherited a headroom of £6.5 billion. I built that up in the autumn to £9.9 billion. And despite what's happened to global borrowing costs, which of course has eroded our headroom in the UK, I built the headroom back up to £9.9 billion, where I started yesterday. You ask about tax or spending decisions, but actually you miss a really important point, which is that by growing the economy, you can make the size of our economy bigger and also bring in more tax revenue. And crucially, the OBR did score yesterday the reforms that we've made to the National Policy Planning Framework, which they say by the end of this Parliament will mean the economy is £6.8 billion bigger than it otherwise would have been, and that will bring in £3.4 billion in terms of additional revenue. And so that is an example of how this government's strategy of going further and faster on delivering economic growth can both improve living standards but also ensure that we've got the money to continue to be able to meet our fiscal rules.
Chancellor, good morning. It's Guy. That is the more medium-term prospect that we are looking at. But let's return to the tax issue, because that feels like it's the shorter-term story that we may need to focus on. Within weeks, you could see the fiscal space that you have eroded. That will necessarily start a conversation about how you, again, return to a position where the rules are going to be met, and that will return us to a conversation about tax rises. The speculation, Chancellor, has already started. Do you recognise, because you've only left us with a small amount of fiscal space, that there will be a conversation about tax rises and that there will be a cost to that conversation? People may be deciding actually to put off investments, to put off spending, because they are worried about the potential tax rises that could come in the autumn.
Well, we wiped the slate clean on the fiscal mismanagement and the fiscal fiction of the previous government last autumn, and we did have to introduce a number of tax measures then. But I was determined yesterday that we continue to meet the fiscal rules without further increasing the tax burden, and that's what I was able to achieve yesterday. But economic growth is an important part of this, because economic growth means that there is more money coming in tax revenues, and also that you're paying less money out in the system. So growth is absolutely essential for a strong economy, but also for strong public finances. And that's why we are redoubling our efforts with the Infrastructure and Planning Bill, which had its successful second reading in Parliament last week. It's why we are introducing the Pensions Bill next month in Parliament to unlock long-term patient capital as part of our capital markets reform. It's why the Prime Minister and me are embarking on a big regulatory overhaul, having got rid of 2 regulators already, and reducing the admin burden of regulation by 25% in this Parliament. So we're going for growth, because growth in the end is the missing ingredient in the last few years in the UK's economic policy. It doesn't just have to be tax and spend. A stronger economy generates the tax revenues that we need to fund our public services and also secure our public finances.
Chancellor, it's Creedy in London. Let's talk about the news of the morning to that end of where that growth comes from, specifically the news emanating out of the United States. You've previously said that the UK is not in a position to escalate tariffs against the United States. That being said, if it comes down to it, what levers can the UK pull?
I believe in free and open trade. I believe it benefits countries exporting and importing. It keeps prices down for consumers and it offers additional choice for consumers and opens up new markets for businesses big and small. I do understand the concerns of the US administration about countries that run large, persistent surpluses with the US. The UK, though, is not one of those countries, which is why at the moment the UK and the US after Prime Minister Keir Starmer's visit to meet the US President a couple of weeks ago. We are now in intensive discussions with the US administration ahead of the increase in tariffs next week to try and secure an agreement. Those talks are ongoing. They will continue later today because we want to make sure that those trade flows between the UK and US continue to be strong. Trade between our two countries increased the last time Donald Trump was President of the United States, and there's no reason why that cannot be the same in this presidency.
Chancellor, you put the emphasis then on those trade conversations with the United States over the next few days. Why specifically are they so important? Are you anticipating any kind of exemption? So far, the Trump administration has not been keen to give the UK exemptions.
Well, we are in those trade discussions at the moment with the United States. They were willing and open to having those conversations with us. Those talks are ongoing. They'll continue today. Of course, trade frictions will make it harder to grow the economy. I don't want to see additional tariffs or any other sort of trade barriers. It's also why the UK and EU are having a summit in May to try and reset relations and reduce the costs of trade barriers between the UK and the EU. So on a number of fronts, the UK trying to support trade because we know it's good for business, we know it's good for jobs, and we know it's good for the bottom line for UK PLC.
Chancellor, is there anything you would be prepared to give up, to do, to make the White House maybe treat the UK in a different way? We were just discussing around the table with Lizzie the possibility of maybe scrapping the digital services tax. Would that be on the table? Are there other levers you could potentially pull? Can you take us inside the room and give us an idea of what is being discussed and what is on the table at this point to maybe see the UK get a different treatment to the one we are potentially going to see meted out to the European Union?
Well, at the moment, there are tariffs on the flow of some goods between the UK and the US, and those tariffs work both ways. I would like to see tariffs between countries fall. So, of course, we're having those conversations. Tax policy is one for national governments to decide, and we'll continue those conversations with the US. They're an important juncture at the moment, ahead of developments next week.